Esta es una presentación de BTR.
Estamos otra vez en el contexto del Sexto Congreso del Futuro, teniendo conversaciones relevantes que puedan servir como input, como base para futuras conversaciones o mejor, futuras decisiones que tomemos para los ciudadanos, para los políticos, para los técnicos, para que la gente se inspire y pueda, por último, tener un buen asado con un buen tema de conversación, como en este caso es algo que nos convoca y nos afecta, que es el problema del agua. So welcome everybody, thank you for being here with us talking. Maybe you know that Chile, as all the world, we were talking before, it is a country with huge problems with water. And so we would like to share your experience on your recommendations also of how can we face this problem. This year, and I think that the last 5 years we have had huge demonstrations like citizens going through the streets and say we need the water because here the water is not a public good. It's private. After one period, one very dark period of our history, it was part of the private system, you know? So I don't know, Daniel, could you tell us in your experience what would you do in a country which has almost nothing? I mean, we don't own our own water, so how can we start?
Well, I don't know what is the meaning that you don't, in English, right?
Yes.
I don't know what is the meaning of not owning your own water. You don't own it because you don't want to own it. That's the problem. The problem is a problem of decision, of deciding what to do with a resource which belongs to everybody.
Yes.
You see, and the problem of water is not a problem of Chile. The problem of water is the problem of the world. It's the problem of lack of management of the resource.
But right now, we are in a situation that the water doesn't belong to us. You are from very faraway countries, and you have a long history, so maybe this is something like you can imagine that you cannot own your water, but here's a reality. So what would you do, Henk?
I think Chile is not alone in the world when it comes to who owns the water. Water as a human right is not addressed as a human right all over the world. Actually, in most places, this is not. So Chile in that sense is not so unique, which is also good. But the bad side of it, the flip side, is that it has this condition and situation. One of the main ambitions of the UN World Bank High-Level Panel on Water, where 11 presidents and prime ministers now sit on, including my prime minister, Mark Rutte, is to change that situation, to bring to the forefront of the global agenda that water is a right for all, and that we have to value it right. And sometimes that means pricing. It definitely means increasing transparency and accountability for governance, but definitely also for businesses and agriculture. So if you open up that playing field for water and water rights, you start to change the way it works. But if you look now at the Chilean government, their ambition is exactly that. They start to unpack and unravel how Chile is governing their water. This will not come easy. This is not something that will change overnight, which is okay. Change overnight is most of the times revolution or war. Change that comes in small steps is much smarter and more sustainable. So working with Chile and other countries all over the world, we will increase that capacity of governments and people, communities and businesses to change the way how they deal with the water right.
But in a capitalistic world, would you try to recover the water for Chile, million Chileans?
I want to take a different perspective than my two colleagues, and that is that I don't actually care who owns the water.
Okay.
I care who sets the rules for how the water is used. And it may well be that the private sector can execute the use of the water better or not better than government? I don't know. I'm actually completely neutral, agnostic about the question. But what I think is an essential piece is that the government, in the name of the people, has to set the guidelines of how water should be used and who and when that water is applied, how these rules are applied. And so once we have an understanding that it's the government's job to establish those parameters, then it's almost doesn't matter whether it's a private sector that runs it or whether it's government agencies that run it. And I know that some people disagree. They think that it has to be government owned. I think that that's a mistake. I think that we could look to bidding it out to a not-for-profit organization. We could look to bidding it out to corporations on a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year basis, or indeed let government do it. But I would say that let all of the different parties who might have an interest in managing the water compete for who can do it best in the name of the citizens and the cities and the farms, and not obsess about who owns the water. And I think in my experience with Chile is that people are very, very much focused on the ownership rather than on the governance.
Because they think that the private institutions are never aware of people's needs. That's what they think.
I want to add to Seth's point.
Okay.
Because this is exactly what it is about. The government can also do it wrong.
Yes.
So there is the thin line on how can you set the rules so you create a level playing field. And this was done wrong in Chile at a time. And now to undo that again is a government responsibility. But it doesn't mean that the government owns the water. It can be owned by multiple agencies and organizations in different ways. And that is what you see around the world. But that demands transparency and access and the opportunity of access for all to that same resource. And that inequality now in Chile is a huge problem. Because the bigger you are with more influence and the less care.
It's a huge problem in every...
If I could just add, and Henk made this point in his first round with you, and that is that I think the other great mistake that is made in Chile and around the world is that water is not priced in most places. There are exceptions, of course. But water is not priced at its real cost. And what I mean by the real cost, a lot of people think the cost of water is to take it and pump it from wherever the big pipe is into your home or into your office or to your farm. Not at all true. The real cost of water is everything from sourcing it, to cleaning it, to disposing of it, to managing it, to governing it. All of those processes are part of the real cost of water. And it isn't that much more expensive, but it's a little bit more expensive. And once people have a market incentive to save or to use technologies to be smarter about their water, suddenly citizens have a whole different approach to water. They start to treat water the way they do their phone bill. They look for better cell phone carriers. They look for better bank deals. They look for better TV deals. And the same way we can bring the same type of mentality of the marketplace to the water sector.
Do you think, Daniel, is not a problem of who owns the water?
I completely agree with my colleagues here. The problem is lack of management. The problem is lack of correct management of the resource. This is the big problem.
And in that sense, it's a cultural part.
Yes.
So you can make a wrong decision, but this starts off culturally. That's why, you got your inspiration for Israel. I, of course, got my inspiration from the Netherlands, where we started by managing water. Not so much of too much, but really about taking care of that valuable resource by valuing it right, both in too much or too little and in the quality. And now our agriculture industry and our big businesses, as well as small businesses, really have a responsibility. They took on that responsibility and they take care of that valuable resource because it's an asset. Our economy, not only in the Netherlands, but all over the world, one-on-one depends on enough water of the best quality. If it's not there, then the economy fails. And that challenge actually creates the incentives to really take care. But you have to create that level playing field where all actors, public and private, institutional or less institutional, can step up. And this is where real water governance comes in. And that's a critical aspect where now the Chilean government is investing a lot in increasing that capacity, that transparency, and a better way of governing and therefore managing the water resource that is so scarce.
If you could choose one example, your very best example of what you think we have to do, what country or what polity would you apply?
Holland, Israel.
So here we are. Yeah.
No, but choose it.
No,
Maybe
but-
not that. I know that
You
Israel has
get
a lot of.
You should get the camera to zoom in on his lapel pin there.
This is the Chilean-Dutch collaboration, which
Yeah.
it stands for. I think there are a multitude of inspirations around the world, luckily. I work in all regions in the world. Some with
We
too
want
much.
regions similar to us because the Netherlands are so like. You have a lot of social history that also is better for you to build confidence and transparency and agreements to. But for us, we live in a country that has a lot of issues in this part. So can you find something very similar to us?
I think there are a lot of similarities, with not so much with the one-on-one similarities on how countries in the world had a history like Chile had. Like there is not the same history the Netherlands or Bangladesh, South Africa, Nepal, or Australia has. They all have different backgrounds. Then again, the boundaries of the country, when you look at culture, are less hard. Borders are man-made over time. It took a long time to make those borders. I think you can get inspiration for that cultural exchange. This is exactly what I said in my talk of von Humboldt. He started to compare the environment and the societies across the world without caring really about the man-made borders. The inspiration that we bring in the collaboration we work with countries all over the world tells you actually that what we do in Bangladesh is very valuable for what you do here. And Bangladesh is a totally different country. And what we build up in Vietnam or in Singapore, totally different conditions, totally different countries.
I know, but we feel we are more near to Bangladesh or Vietnam than to Netherlands. I mean, we are.
You are nowhere near Bangladesh and Vietnam, I can tell you. And your
but Finland either. I mean, we are always hearing about, well, in Finland,
I think you should
do with them.
No, I think the positive side of this is that, and I actually think you're underestimating what is happening in your own country and the inspiration you can get from your own country. Totally. I don't have a negative look at Chile at all. And don't compare yourself with Vietnam or Bangladesh because you're way off.
Right.
Some of the work you're doing is more comparable to the Netherlands and Singapore than is actually happening or can happen in countries like Bangladesh or Myanmar. You're far further. Your economy is far better. Your transparency is increasing. And there's a huge opportunity for innovation, both from a business, a government, and a community perspective. So I saw a lot of examples the last time I was here of community work and collaborative effort. I'm not saying that you're there, but tell me a country that is there besides the Netherlands. I mean, there's a lot of work in the world when you deal about water, and we have to hold hands, exchange that inspirational capacity, and stick to holding hands. That's the other thing. Building up a relation takes up a lot of energy and has to last from all parts. You can't just think you can fix the problem. It's the same with climate change. Forget about it, you think you can fix it. It's going to stick there forever, and water is going to stick forever. So it's a cultural change and a cultural approach, and Chile is in a great position to move that forward.
Daniel, I'm sorry, you speak Spanish. So,
It's okay.
what would you do here to start this work? I think we haven't started yet.
I don't think that you need to start. I think that you need to consider your water resources, to understand what do you have in a quantitative way, okay? To know how much water, surface water you have and how much groundwater you have, what is the replenishment, to understand the system. If you know what your system is, then you understand how to manage it. And I completely agree here with my colleagues that it doesn't matter who is going to manage it if you manage it good. You see, but to manage something, you need to know what you are going to manage, okay? What amounts of water are you going to get each year? What is the replenishment of the water? What is the quality of the water you have, okay? And not all the time speak about climate change and things like that. You see, because if you go to an area of Chile where they don't know, for example, how much groundwater they have. Why? Because they have a lot of surface water. But they don't know how much groundwater they have. They don't know how many wells they have, what is the groundwater quality, and so on. So next year will be drought, and everybody will start crying. Crying,
We
why?
have been crying for the last 8 years.
What?
We have been crying for the last 8 years.
Okay, so don't be like a child, stop it, and start working.
Yeah.
Come on. This is a fantastic country with fantastic people, with fantastic water resources compared to other places of the world.
Yes.
It's like the example that I gave in my talk about Bolivia, that they were crying about no water, and now they are dying because of floods. Meaning it's an irrational approach to the problem. And I think that this is the basic problem, an irrational approach to the resource water. Because we see it everywhere and we think it will be there forever, and this is why we don't pay attention to what's going on.
We don't think that's going to be forever. In fact, that's the huge problem right now. We're going to make a pause and we return with you, Seth, because I need your example and your position about how can we start, because it's huge. ¿Ah? Estamos en esta entrevista hablando de agua. Usted ha visto cómo la gente ha salido a la calle a hacer una de las marchas más numerosas durante los últimos años, reclamando el derecho del agua con priorización en las personas, que ha sido uno de los grandes temas. Y aquí se levantó todo un posicionamiento político respecto del agua y de quién tiene que ser el dueño del agua para su mejor administración, que aquí ha quedado por el suelo. Así que volvemos enseguida después de la pausa y sacaremos, esperamos, algunas ideas para enfrentar nuestros temas. Volvemos con la conversación sobre el agua. Aquí se ha planteado que finalmente la solución del agua tiene que ver mucho más que ver con el manejo de los recursos, ¿verdad? Y no con quién tiene el agua, porque quien lo tenga lo puede administrar bien o mal. Ese es, en términos generales, el planteamiento. So, Seth, what do you think about a good example that can be good for us? And what do you think of, what's the first step?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that there are role models and examples and potential friends all over the world. And that a mistake in life generally is to think that there's only one path, or that there's only one role model, and likewise for countries. And I would say the right thing to do is to look around the world and be selective. Some places you can learn from about this and other things about that. As you know, the book I wrote is about the Israel water experience. And so I can speak to you about that a little bit before I give you...
Which is similar to the north of Chile.
Well, but the point about it is that what the concern is the fact that they made a decision socially to prioritize it. And so it wasn't like number 8 or 9 or 10 on the social agenda of the nation. Defense was first. Immigration absorption was second, and water was third. And they were bunched together very close. They were thought of as being all interdependent. And this is before there even was a country in 1948. And so because of that prioritization, it became inevitable almost that what you think about is most important, where you put your social resources, where you put your financial resources against, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, you get pretty good results. You know, hospitals that focus on one area versus another area tend to be pretty good in that area. And likewise, countries that focus on something over something else tend to be pretty good at that, whatever that it is. And I would say that that's an important issue, is that this conversation is an important conversation, but we need to amplify this hundredfold and thousandfold, where every household in Chile needs to be thinking about water on some level or another. And until that happens, you're really not going to have the focus that you need. That's one. The second thing I would say is, if you want me to pick just one idea or one technology, I think that we undervalue the role of technology in fixing our water problems. In utilities, there's a lot of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And on the farm, it's a lot of, well, my father or my grandfather didn't do it that way, so why should I do it that way? And I think that those are types of culture changes that Henk was talking about that take time to evolve, but that we can help accelerate that. And let me tell you specifically what, what I'd like to drive at.
Please.
It would be, right now, you have not an enormous, millions of hectares of Chilean farmland that are irrigated with drip irrigation.
Yes.
Drip irrigation is an enormously efficient way of producing a larger yield on your crop, but also using far, far less water. There's a cost to installing the drip irrigation. And so farmers need to be given the incentive by government to know they're going to get either cheap loans or loan guarantees or subsidized programs that will encourage them that they will go from flood irrigating their fields, which is enormously water consumptive and you lose so much to evaporation, versus drip irrigation and other micro irrigation that will be very efficient. And you know what's going to happen, Paloma? In a generation, the farmer of tomorrow is going to look back and say, drip irrigation, micro irrigation, of course. That's the way my father did it. And it's on us, it's on our generation to make that the inevitable. So I think that if we could find a way to transforming our agriculture, and I know Chile, it's a very significant user of the water as agriculture as it is everywhere. If we could do that, you could cut by 15 or 20% the amount of water being used. You could preserve your groundwater resources for tomorrow when you'll need it. And you'll have a better water future and a safer destiny if you'll do all that.
We want to change the scale and talk about people. How can you change the people minds about like everything, like, you know, the shower or having enormous gardens of green things that needs a lot of water. We have a lot of them. And how can you change that ordinary behaviors?
It starts, again, with choosing that you want to talk about this.
Yeah.
So the conversation that started between the Netherlands and Chile, the first thing on the agenda was the dialogue, the water dialogue. Why? Let's prioritize water as a #1 issue. It's a risk, but it's also the biggest opportunity. And inform each other with the right data and that we know what we talk about. That it's not assumptions, but it's for real, but also invest in others, in communities and people on the ground and in places that are at risk or less at risk. Information, open data is critical, because with information you're in control yourself. Without that information, you assume that you are or you're not. So the water dialogue to invest, and we do this in a lot of places around the world, where people...
And how does this water dialogue work? I mean, you make plenty of meetings in different parts of the territory.
Yeah. So one of the...
Or you do a campaign. How do you start this dialogue?
You start with exposing the research and the data that is out there to everyone, but also expose good examples. And that's, you know, building on what my two colleagues say at in this conversation. The world is full of those examples, but Chile is also full of those examples, small and big. So you bring them to the forefront. Nothing talks so good as a good example and people that are connected to it. They can tell how they deal with water. I was in Valdivia in August, and people from the community came to me and said, hey, can we talk to you about the project we're doing in our city on reducing water? In California, a Dutch innovator in this sense, but he was totally Americanized, invented a little stick, and it measured the amount of water the soil needed. The stick was connected with a digital system to his computer and iPhone, and it saved 75% of water usage because it immediately knew where the soil needed water and where not. So next to one drop per crop type of programs where drop irrigation is critical, information is critical, so you are in control. So you can do these programs more generic on raising awareness of water and how you can change your behavior, but you can do them also very specific in communities at risk with opportunities to decrease water or to garden differently. We have a program in Amsterdam. It's called, this is the Netherlands, but our cities also face climate change, so more extreme weather events. It's flop your tile. It's an easy program. Just people take out the tile from their gardens and put in a plant. And all of a sudden, and people do it themselves. Nothing, there's no government rule that you can't have a tile in your garden. No oppression or whatever. No, people are incentivized by the narrative, by showcasing it and going door to door. So sometimes it's that easy, start small, and sometimes you need bigger examples. Mm-hmm. And the water diet, we made a little book in Spanish on how we did it over 2,000 years in the Netherlands. And this is not a book to brag about the Netherlands. This is just to be inspirational. Here, look at this is a solution on water quality. And this is a solution on water governance. And this is what we learned from Germany, or this is what we learned in Vietnam. You have to collaborate, exchange information, and inspire each other in that collaboration.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So the dialogue starts there, but it also needs real research. We need better understanding of future challenges. We're not there yet. The future is going to be a little tougher. So we invest in R&D programs, and again, collaborations across the globe that add to that knowledge base that governments, businesses, communities can use in the ways they move forward. And one last example to that, in Africa, we use satellite data to assess how the farmers use water. You can pick it up from satellite data. You and I'm not so good at that, but if you take two nerds in a room, they can immediately assess what the farmers use for water. And we don't use that data to blame and shame. No, we go out to those farmers and say, hey, look what your water leakage problems is. Your pipes are leaking, you lose 40 or 60% of the water. You lose more water a year than your crops actually need. Let's try to fix it. So you build capacity door by door, community by community. And farmers tell each other. They say, hey, I saved on my water, so now I don't have a lack of water. I have an abundance of water, so we can share. And I will tell you how we did this. So it's this, well, she said there's no silver bullet. There's a multitude of ways of doing this, but we have to invest in that.
Daniel, you are from Argentina. You said nobody's perfect.
Right.
I really like Argentina. You know this part of the world. So what do you think is the most important thing right now to have this collaboration? You come from a country that is just like ours in terms of confidence right now. So how do you start? Or do you know some examples in Argentina that can be good to us?
Look, after working for many years in a lot of South American and Central American countries, I think that the biggest problem and the way of leading to a solution is education.
Yes.
I think that we need to educate the future generations about the problems of water, how to deal with water, and this needs to start at the kindergarten level. And in Israel, we developed a special program which is called the Blue Planet. And the idea is to introduce, in this case, is in the junior high school level, okay, all the concept of water, the importance of water, to make people understand what is water and that without water we don't have life. Okay, and not to look at water as something that is there and was there forever and will be there forever. It will not if we don't take care of it. So in my opinion, education of the future generations towards a better treatment of the water, management of the water, is critical for the future.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you all.
Can I say one happy word?
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say one happy word, which is that, as I discover a lot when I travel to, let's say, outside of Western Europe or the United States, lots of people are prone to beat themselves up. They think they're not good enough for it. They think they're not going to achieve. And they think that the situation is hopeless. And that what was will be, and so forth. And I want to give an analogy, if I can, and that is from public health. A short generation ago, almost everybody smoked cigarettes.
Yes.
And that was subsidized by very wealthy tobacco companies that
Yes.
encouraged that.
Yes.
And they had to fight against very small government budgets. And yet, you know what happened? In a very short time, cigarette smoking went from being very cool
Yes.
to being not very cool.
Yes.
And whereas once upon a time on the airplane, the people sitting next to me were smoking cigarettes, the people behind me were smoking
You
cigarettes.
just have to see Mad Men, you know.
It's inconceivable now.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I would say to you is that by looking at the world of public health and you see other dramatic changes happening, it seems in real time impossible that it will never happen.
Yes.
But I am, without any question whatsoever, positive that in a short time from now, you'll be looking back on this generation, you look back and say, did we really do that in water? Did we really do that? And that's going to come about because of the fact that your government will start educating people.
Yes.
You'll start having a change of point of view. This broadcast will be seen by thousands and then millions, and people will start talking about it. And suddenly it'll be like, it's inevitable. It couldn't be otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Here,
this is
here in
so
Chile,
true
it started
because
with the law.
Yeah, it's the educational part that brings it together. I was so happy when I worked for President Obama in New York that we worked with schools in the neighborhoods that came to us and said, we want to work on water. And in the Netherlands, my little cousin of 9, Rosa, she called me up and said, Uncle Henk, I have to do a talk at school. And I said, wow, yeah, that's great, but I'll do it on water. And I said, why? And she started to talk to me about the issues of water.
That's
And I think
total change.
that type
That's
of
the point.
changing where the new generation steps up, and we develop with partners all over the world a global water atlas. And it's an atlas that will showcase, despair and complexity for that understanding, but pathways forward with the young generation on board. And that atlas, it's digital, of course, it's interactive, you can upload your projects, and Chile can show off as well as pose their questions on such a platform. That atlas is a way to communicate and combine efforts, but definitely to inspire. And if the next generation and the generations that follow, like Seth said, and said, you know, my father did it.
Yes.
Then we're in the right way.
Thank you very much. You should stay here in Chile and make this happen, please. And we hope you come again to the next future Congress.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hasta aquí llegamos con esta conversación. Estamos siempre en esta lucha de qué es lo primero. Los humanos tenemos muchos argumentos para poner cosas antes de hacer lo que tenemos que hacer. Al menos podríamos empezar por estas, ponernos un poco de acuerdo, tener algunas conversaciones, hacer una buena campaña, sacar una ley. Algo así podría servir por lo menos para partir. Nos vemos pronto en otra conversación del futuro.
Esta es una presentación de BTR.